A single sentence delivered by a senior Iranian official to CNN on Saturday morning. Iran will allow oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz, but only if the cargo is paid for in Chinese yuan, not dollars. Yuan, four words that carry more weight than anything that has happened on a battlefield in the past 2 weeks. Because what Iran just proposed is not a military move. It is a direct attack on the system that has kept America at the center of the global economy for 50 years. Today we are going to break down exactly what that sentence means, why it matters more than any explosion you have seen on television, and what happens to the world if this idea gains traction. When most people hear the word petrodollar, their eyes glaze over. It sounds like an economics lecture. It sounds theoretical. It sounds like something that happens in boardrooms, not battlefields. But here's the thing. The petrodollar system is the reason America can afford to project military power around the entire planet simultaneously. It is the reason America can run deficits that would bankrupt any other country. It is the reason that despite spending trillions on wars, on debt, on everything, the dollar remains the currency every country on earth needs to hold. Remove that system, or even seriously damage it, and the financial foundation underneath American global power begins to crack. And Iran just threw a stone directly at that foundation. To understand why this matters, you need to go back to 1971. Before that year, the dollar was tied to gold. Every dollar in circulation was backed by physical gold sitting in American vaults. Countries trusted the dollar because they could, in theory, exchange it for gold. Then Richard Nixon ended that arrangement, the gold backing disappeared, and suddenly the dollar faced a question it had never faced before. Why should anyone trust it? The answer came from the Middle East. In 1974, the United States struck a deal with Saudi Arabia. The arrangement was simple. Saudi Arabia would price all of its oil sales in US dollars. In return, America would provide military protection for the kingdom. OPEC followed. Country by country, the global oil trade shifted to dollars, and what that created was something extraordinary. Suddenly, every country on Earth that needed oil, which was every country on Earth, needed to hold US dollars to buy it. Japan needed dollars, China needed dollars, India, Germany, Brazil, every industrial economy on the planet needed dollars. That created constant, permanent, structural demand for the American currency, and that demand is what allowed America to borrow endlessly, spend endlessly, and maintain a military presence across the globe that no other country could afford to replicate. The petrodollar is not just an economic arrangement. It is the financial spine of American global power, and it has survived for 52 years because every attempt to challenge it has been crushed. This part of the story is worth understanding carefully, because Iran is not the first country to try this. In the year 2000, Saddam Hussein announced that Iraq would switch its oil sales from dollars to euros. 3 years later, America invaded Iraq. After the invasion, Iraqi oil sales returned to dollars. Muammar Gaddafi proposed a gold-backed Pan-African currency for oil trade. In 2011, NATO forces intervened in Libya. Gaddafi was killed. The currency proposal died with him. Nicolás Maduro deepened Venezuela's ties with China and promoted oil trade outside the dollar system. The Trump administration captured him in January of 2026. The pattern is consistent enough that analysts have a name for it: the petrodollar war theory. The idea that countries which threaten dollar oil pricing face consequences that go far beyond ordinary diplomatic pressure. And now Iran, the country America has been bombing for 14 days, has just announced it will reopen the most critical oil waterway on the planet, but only on terms that bypass the dollar entirely. The proposal is specific and it is deliberate. A senior Iranian official told CNN that Tehran is considering allowing a limited number of oil tankers to transit the Strait of Hormuz, on the condition that the cargo is traded in Chinese yuan. Now, read that carefully. Iran is not simply reopening Hormuz. Iran is offering to reopen Hormuz on new financial terms. Terms that exclude the dollar, terms that benefit China, terms that, if adopted, would create a precedent that has never existed before in the 52-year history of the petrodollar system. The Revolutionary Guard Navy has already been issuing what analysts are calling IRGC certificates, essentially permits allowing ships to pass through the strait. Iran controls the valve, and Iran is now deciding what currency you need to pay to open it. For China, this is an enormous opportunity. Beijing has been trying for years to expand the use of the yuan in global oil transactions. The M-Bridge project, yuan-denominated oil futures on the Shanghai exchange, swap lines with dozens of countries. All of it has been building toward exactly this kind of moment, a moment where a critical oil choke point operates in yuan rather than dollars. And right now, with Hormuz partially closed and oil above $100 a barrel, countries that desperately need that oil to flow are facing a very practical question. Do they wait for America to reopen the strait on dollar terms? Or do they quietly accept Iran's yuan condition and get their oil moving again? The answer is that some countries are not waiting. India received direct assurances from Tehran's ambassador of safe passage. India is already navigating the calculation of whether to accept yuan terms to keep its energy imports flowing. Turkey is in the same position. The Gulf states are already diverting what oil they can through alternative pipelines, but those pipelines have a hard limit. They can handle perhaps 2.6 million barrels per day combined. Hormuz normally carries 20 million. The deficit is roughly 12 million barrels every single day that has nowhere to go. That deficit is what gives Iran its leverage. Every week that Hormuz stays closed is another week of energy desperation for countries across Asia. And every week of energy desperation makes the yuan alternative more attractive regardless of what Washington prefers. China itself is already buying 90% of Iran's oil exports through shadow networks routed via Malaysia, Singapore, and Vietnam to avoid sanctions. The financial infrastructure for yuan-denominated Iranian oil already exists. Iran is not proposing something new. It is proposing to make something that already happens in the shadows into something that happens openly at scale through the world's most important waterway. So what does this mean for America? The short answer is that America cannot bomb its way out of this particular problem. Airstrikes can destroy centrifuges. Airstrikes can kill generals. Airstrikes can flatten infrastructure. But airstrikes cannot force China to stop buying oil in yuan. They cannot prevent India from making a quiet financial calculation. They cannot reverse a precedent once it is established in global energy markets. The dollar's dominance in oil trade is not enforced by aircraft carriers alone. It is enforced by habit, by trust, by the absence of a credible alternative. Iran, working alongside China, is now actively building that alternative. Not by defeating America militarily, but by offering the rest of the world a transaction that makes practical sense when Hormuz is closed and energy is desperately needed. Oil prices are already up 47% in 15 days. Brent crude has hit levels not seen since the worst moments of the 2022 Ukraine crisis. Every day those prices stay elevated. Every day shipping companies keep their tankers anchored outside the strait. The pressure on governments to find any workable solution grows more intense. And right now, Iran is the only entity offering a workable solution on its own terms in yuan. Here is what makes this moment historically significant beyond the immediate crisis. The petrodollar system has survived every challenge thrown at it for 52 years because the challengers were isolated. Saddam was alone. Gaddafi was alone. Maduro was alone. None of them had the backing of the world's second largest economy. None of them controlled a choke point through which 20% of the world's oil flows. Iran has both. China is not going to invade to stop this. China is going to quietly encourage it. Every yuan-denominated oil transaction that happens through Hormuz is a data point, a precedent, proof that the system can work without dollars. And precedents, once established, have a way of becoming permanent. The United States Treasury and the Federal Reserve understand this perfectly. That is why the financial dimension of this war is being watched as closely in Washington as the military dimension. Because a country can rebuild its military, it is much harder to rebuild a monetary system once the world starts to question whether it needs you at all. Trump's entire war rationale was built around strength, demonstrating that America cannot be challenged, restoring deterrence, showing the world what happens when you threaten American interests. But there is a version of this war where America wins every battle in the air and loses something far more important on the ground. Not territory, not soldiers, the quiet, invisible, structural authority that comes from being the country whose currency the world cannot function without. That authority has never been seriously threatened before. Not like this. Not with China actively supporting the alternative, not with 20 million barrels a day held hostage by the country offering to replace the system. 52 years ago, a deal between Washington and Riyadh built something that became the financial foundation of American global power. Right now, in the narrow waters between Iran and Oman, something is being quietly dismantled. Whether it survives this war intact, whether the dollar emerges from this conflict as dominant as it went in, may matter more for the next 50 years than anything happening in the skies over Tehran. Think about that.